Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. Today, we're talking about all things Indian, and we're going to find out what is going on with cryptocurrency in India. I've been hearing that it's banned. You know, everybody's always saying Bitcoin's dead, Bitcoin's banned, but it never really is exactly what you think it is. And the person that I thought of when I thought of India and Bitcoin was, of course, Sunny Ray, who's a good friend of mine from the crypto community. He used to organize a lot of different events up in Toronto. I was lucky enough to perform at some of them, attend. He also has a podcast that I was recently on, so you could check that out on TatianaMoroz.com. And then so we're going to talk about what's going on and what's the latest with Unocoin. They're a big exchange. But first, I have to, of course, say hello to my wonderful co-host, Josh Agala from Vaultoro. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Hey, Tatiana. Good. I'm doing well. It's anything goes well when you're in a bull market. You know, it's always fun. Things actually move. People trade. People buy things. Businesses boom. Whoever said price doesn't matter is wrong. Because
I agree.
When price goes up, things actually get going. People are talking about it, and it's really a good time in crypto when it's going up.
Absolutely. And I know you're going to have some new announcements from Vaultoro coming up, so we'll have to do a deep dive into that in the next couple of weeks. But
yeah.
Cool. All right. So, without further ado, let's bring on Sunny. Hey, Sunny. Nice to see you on the Tatiana Show.
Hey, Tatiana. Nice to reconnect. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Great.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think that there might be just a little bit of a delay between us, but that's okay.
Fair enough.
Okay, great. So let's get started. For people who are unfamiliar with your work, obviously you've done the conferences, but tell me a little bit about Unocoin. And, you know, obviously you don't have an Indian accent, so you grew up in Canada. Did you have family roots there that you would go back all the time? What's the connection?
Yeah, so real quick, my parents are from a place called Calcutta, but they moved to Canada well before I was born. And so I was born and raised in Canada. I spent the first 20 years in Alberta and then the last 20 in Toronto, with the exception of about 4 or 5 years where I lived in India. And so my story is I studied electrical engineering. I ran my own financial brokerage for a couple of years, felt more confused about money at the end of that journey, and eventually went into robotics, spent 8 years in robotics. And then in 2011, found myself essentially in India on behalf of that company and came across the Bitcoin white paper, fell down the rabbit hole like many of us. And that's kind of, how our Bitcoin journey started and why I'm involved with Unocoin, and I'm one of the founders of Unocoin. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want me to go into that story here.
That's a good overview.
Yeah, please.
Tell me a little bit about Unocoin and its position in India. You know, how many exchanges are there? And I know that you've kind of been doing it for such a long time. You've gone through ups and downs. Can you walk us through that journey a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like was said earlier, mostly ups, right? Because of the price and Bitcoin's arc. But there's been some serious downs as well. So as you mentioned earlier, I love doing events. So I've been doing events since the beginning, meaning I was in Toronto. I saw what Anthony Diorio, a lot of these people were doing in Toronto with Bitcoin events, and I felt like I was missing out. So my bright idea was I'll just start doing events here, and I'll just surround myself with Bitcoiners. And so one thing led to another. I ended up meeting Satvik, Harish, and Abhi, who are now are my co-founders at Unocoin. And our insight was really, it was simple. I mean, we used to do these events and people would be like excited about Bitcoin, and then we didn't have a place to send them because there was no easy place to buy and sell Bitcoin. So we built India's first Bitcoin platform. Our investors are guys like Barry Silbert, who was our first investor, and most recently last year, Tim Draper, and then Adam Draper and Max Kaiser. I mean, we've got everybody that I'd ever want to have as an investor, we have as an investor. So I'm really proud of that. And then in terms of the story of Unocoin, we're at about 2 million users today. Just to kind of give you some highlights. So when we started Unocoin in December 2013, we did it at a conference similar to the one in Toronto, but instead it was in Bangalore. It was at the Sheraton as well. And it wasn't myself, but some others had invited We invited everybody. It was in the news. We invited entrepreneurs, professors, young people, old people. I mean, for us, it was like Bitcoin's going to be here for forever. And so somehow I think the regulators also heard about it, and they also attended. And so, we from back then, we were like, okay, we got to be forthcoming and open about this technology. It's open source. I mean, let's embrace it. And I'll skip the story around what happened at that event, but a week after that, the central bank, the RBI.
Hold on. What happened?
Oh, you want me to go into? Okay, well, we only have an
happen?
hour, so
And then
but
yada yada yada.
yeah.
Did somebody like throw
So I
a
missed-
shoe or what happened?
No, it was a samosa. But no, I'm kidding. No. No samosas were thrown. No shoes, no chappals were thrown. What happened was, I just thought it was interesting. I don't say it in a negative way. It was just like, this was my experience. Someone came to me, tapped me on the shoulder and said, Sonny, hey, you're one of the organizers and blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah. He said, somebody from the central bank is here and they'd like to speak to someone from here. And I said, sure, like, awesome. And I went up and then the person simply just said, look, like,
Hello.
No, yeah, like Darth Vader. No. He was a kind, elderly gentleman that essentially said, look, don't. If anyone mentions that I'm here publicly in the conference, then I'm gonna step out. Like, don't put us, like, don't put the spotlight on us. And so, to which we said, yeah, respectfully, like, what else are we going to do? Obviously. So we just said, enjoy the food and your time and whatever. And so anyway, so a week after that, Tatiana, there was the infamous kind of notice that was put on there. And by the way, it was at that event that Unocoin launched, right? That was kind of why I mentioned it.
Wait, what notice? What infamous notice?
Yes,
I don't know about this notice.
Yeah. So this is why I said the history is important. So this was in January 2014. A notice was put on the central bank's website, essentially warning the public about two main risk factors. One was volatility, and the second was security. They said, look, these are concerning, and if people are going to dabble in this, then they should do it at their own risk. I'm obviously paraphrasing. People should go read it. It's public information, right? But that's kind of what they said, and it was dramatic. At the time, we didn't know what to do or how to react, but our lawyers, so our lawyer is Nishit Desai, and Nishit Desai is in my top 3 favorite people in the world. They are insanely, like, intelligent. It's like a group of essentially hundreds of lawyers that are engineers first and then lawyers, meaning they specialize in technical elements and they're way years ahead. Anyways, so long story short, in the cloud of all this confusion, Nishit Desai and associates put on a press conference in their office. And there will be a Netflix, or Bollywood movie made about all this someday. But they put on a press conference and they said, look, as per our techno-legal analysis, we believe that Bitcoins are not illegal. And they didn't say Bitcoins are legal, because no law firm can say something is legal, tender, or whatever, right? All they said is that it's not illegal, meaning from our understanding, this technology is big, and so it's here to stay, and it's that. And that was interesting because that gave the industry confidence to kind of say, okay, well, you know what, we're not doing anything wrong. I mean, for us, we were even, I know KYC is kind of a touchy subject amongst Bitcoiners, but we saw the model that was working globally, and we knew, and I'd spent time in financial industry, as I said, so we knew that there were certain guardrails that we needed to put in place to protect, ourselves and eventually, our customers, or, and we knew that law enforcement would come knocking at one point, and we needed to, if some dude was doing super nefarious things that, let's say, all of us can agree is bad, we'd, like, terrorism, for example, which is sometimes that's something that does happen, especially in India. We can work with the good guys to not enable that. And so for us, it was an interesting journey. So I will mention that. So there was this notice that went on the central bank's website, and that same notice, Tatiana, without boring the crowd, resurfaced a couple of times over the years. Okay, and then it all culminated to 2017 when the central bank, and this was when, you have to keep in mind, and I'm trying to be very, very, like, understanding and empathetic towards, like, regulators, because they're people too. You won't hear Bitcoiners maybe, but there are people too, and they're trying to do their job, and they have different mandates like protecting their country and things like that, right? And national competitiveness, et cetera, which I'll get to later. But for us, it was always important to try and work with these people. But okay, anyways, so the central bank essentially issued a notice saying that they didn't want any banks working with any Bitcoin companies. This was, again, a few years ago. And that was devastating. That was devastating because you can imagine a company that, works in bridging the gap between fiat and Bitcoin. That's our singular mission, was to do that for billions of people eventually. Now we're at 2 million, but to do that that's devastating. So we, as an industry, decided to come together and stand up. And then, we believed that the notice was unconstitutional. And so we challenged it in the court of law. It started in, I think, the high courts, and then it went to the Supreme Court. And again, long story short, and I can go into some details because there are some juicy moments in there. But long story short, we ended up winning the court case, and all three judges decided that the bank ban that we've been fighting over the last many years was unconstitutional, that it wasn't proportional, that it didn't, meet any sort of international kind of standards or benchmarks. It just didn't make a lot. It just didn't make a lot of sense. And so anyway, so we were very, very happy with that. So a year ago, our banking was back online. The next day, I think Saturday, the manager was at Suffolk's house and we got everything back. And for the last year, everything's been great, as you know, right? So we went from maybe the 100,000th top website in the world to like now we're 40,000th, meaning so it's been in 3 months, right? Or 4 months. And so, yeah, it's been great. And then that kind of, I guess, brings us to today. And like I said, there are a lot of stuff I've glossed over and I've talked about it online. If you want me to go into it, I can, but I know you wanted to focus more on the current and kind of what's happening today, but that hopefully gives people a bit of background.
Yeah, just to add that, I really remember it very vividly as you guys won, and seeing pictures of I think it was team of 4 of you guys, the main core team. Obviously, there's more behind, but really just walking out of there and photos. It was just so wonderful to see this. And I remember meeting regulators at gold conferences in Perth from India, and me just giving them a mouthful, saying, "What are you guys doing? You guys are fools. You guys are being fools." Everyone, India has this wonderful, rich diverseness of developers, of bright minds developing in this space, and they're all fleeing. They're all fleeing to countries where this thing's illegal. How can you possibly make the future of finance illegal? And even if you don't think it's finance, all this is digital files that can't be copied. How can you possibly make that illegal? This is the most foolish thing that I've seen globally for a long time. The second foolish thing was that the UK passed a VAT on Bitcoin, and they got rid of it really quickly because they realized it was foolish. And he was like, "Oh yeah, well, I'll think about it, and I'll tell the right people, but it is what it is." And so I remember feeling like, wow, the guys in India that are fighting this have got a tough battle ahead. And so, yeah, I was really happy when you guys won that.
So, yeah, that was, I'm not going to lie, a bit of a surprise to myself as well. I mean, for people who know, I when things were going sideways, there was not much for me to do. And so Jesse was kind enough to hire me as his head of business development for Kraken. So I worked there for a year. And when we won the court case, even I was a bit surprised because the cards were stacked against us. It was bad. And I won't go into again detail about it, but I don't know if you guys know, but like even Satvik and Harish, you guys may have heard of maybe I'll go into this quickly because I think it's important and a lot of people don't know about it still. Is so in the face of this bank ban, right, which happened a couple of years ago, like I said, we have the best lawyers in the world as they're like stakeholders in our company, like they really get this Bitcoin thing, and we said to ourselves, and this wasn't really my idea, but still, we said, okay, well, from first principles, if you think about it, Bitcoin doesn't need banks, right? Like what we have are now 2 million customers. Like What if we just, enabled our customers to, buy and sell Bitcoin from a kiosk, a Bitcoin kiosk, and then so we said, hey, why don't we buy the same ones that the banks use for their purposes and repurpose them for Bitcoin purposes. We put a machine in a mall, and long story short, it got taken out of context, and it essentially. Long story short, Satvik and Harish were taken away for a day or two, wrongfully, I might add, and just a couple weeks ago, the High Court squashed the entire thing, meaning it's like officially, as in it's recognized now. It's not just me telling a story about it, but they were taken away, believe it or not. And I think the reason that arrest or whatever, that incident was important is because in the court case, aside from the 5 legal matters that were fought, one of the final points that the judges brought up is they said, look, and I'm paraphrasing again, right? So people don't quote me, but they said, look, you guys are fighting this on the basis of a constitution, but the constitution applies to people, not like companies and groups of companies, right? So show us an example of where a person's livelihood was impacted. And it was Harish, my co-founder. In fact, to the day, it was yesterday, it was the day a year after that it happened. You guys were talking about the picture, the 4 people coming out of the Supreme, like Harish started crying, and because he was like front and center. I'm just more like the mouthpiece. I tell, because I'm in Canada, right, as you know, so I'm kind of telling the world about the good news and trying my best. I obviously am quite involved, but these are the guys that were kind of at the heart and center of that. Anyways, so that's a lot about, I know, the past, but I'm pretty sure people want to know about what's going on now.
Yeah. No, actually, one thing about the past that I'd like to ask you was when India banned was it the 500 dinar note? Which one was it? They banned one of the notes, and it was the main one that that people use for cash because it was like this right amount of denomination. But it was the main one that was on the cash markets. And so it really made a lot of people suffer in that moment where they had like, I don't know, a few weeks to trade it in for a different one. What happened at that stage for the crypto community?
Traffic on our website tripled. If you're looking at like data wise, obviously it was a great, marketing campaign for Bitcoin, but joking aside, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just my thought again. It was sad. It was sad to see hundreds of people lined up at ATM machines trying to get their cash out and not being able to. People dying. It was sad seeing them having to use fighter pilot jets to get cash out to rural areas, and like it just felt like really, I don't know. It just felt like Bitcoin needs to It just feels like Bitcoin can solve a lot of problems. And like, again, I know we're going to go into kind of what's happening now, but if you just fast forward to today, there's a lot of, really positive things coming out that we're hearing. And this is why I'm being a bit more public about all this stuff, because there's stuff that's public, like even today, whether it's like former ministers of the RBI or finance minister, they've come out and they've said, look, like we recognize that, that crypto assets, maybe not cryptocurrencies, we're not going to replace the rupee anytime soon. Like, don't get excited about that. But, Elon Musk, really? Elon Musk, okay. Like, we're going to call him now a criminal too, I guess? No, we can't, right? So I think there is a recognition that we've gone kind of far extreme. And I think that the community, the Bitcoin community, like all of us as entrepreneurs, we're to blame. I think to a certain extent. I think it's hard to just. I think it's easy to just blame like regulators and politicians and always make them out to look like the bad guy. I think we haven't made, maybe yes, even though we invited them to an event, great, big deal. But like I think the piece that's coming together now, hopefully, is that hopefully there could be some sort of long-term kind of collaboration and working towards, because like, no.
Did we really need to
Hey, with a name like Sunny, you have a wonderful Sunny.
And by that, I mean, let's not ban it.
I'm sorry, guys. I love you, but like, let's be real here. The reason why Bitcoin is out is because these scumbags at the top of all these institutions ruined the world with their policies. They are not our friends. I'm not talking about being uncivilized toward a certain individual that happens to work for government office. But at the end of the day, these are the scumbags that are in charge of, oh, Julian Assange, he can't get out of jail. Snowden gets in trouble, but they keep spying. Like, I'm talking about the United States in this case. But the institution of the state is an immoral, disgusting thievery. And I'm not into it. So I personally don't care about helping them. They tried to put your friend in jail. They tried to put you out of business. They don't give a shit about their people in their country. And I'm not having it. So, you know, if y'all want to make friends with the government, that's cool. And I will be polite with them because there's human beings on the other end of that, right? But the institutions of the government have been the reason why we're here where we are. Sorry.
There's a really important point. There's a really important point in there, which is that you said it a couple times, which is that, you know, and that's the beauty of it, is when you break it down to an individual basis and you're sitting with a human being straight. And this is why I'm telling stories about like this happened, that happened, because at the end, and that's why I'm doing this Bitcoin stories thing, right? This whole whatever podcast thing is like, it comes down to like just people's stories, and everyone has a different kind of lens into Bitcoin, right? And yeah, no, I mean, I definitely can feel into your frustration, right? And
oh man,
yeah, but as
a
president of like you know, a company like this, unfortunately, there's only so many things I can say and can't. You got to just read my eyeballs. Next question.
I mean, right?
I'm the same. I'm the same. What I find really beautiful is that the people of India are very, very they're very diverse in the way that they use money. There's a lot of trade, a lot of barter, and a lot of movement, and Bitcoin just seems to be this perfect fit. One thing that I do worry about is that that Bitcoin becomes too expensive for the normal folk. That's really what is scaring me. How much is Unocoin doing towards like building towards the Lightning Network and stuff? Because I feel like there really is the solution in terms of the Bitcoin blockchain, in terms of scaling that second layer.
I love Lightning. I've been a huge fan of Lightning for a long time. We were a part of the Liquid network. I mean, to be frank with you, Unocoin, like I said, the story that I just told you about, unfortunately, I hate telling the story about like, you know, regulators and courts and stuff, because that's not the story I want to tell. I want to tell Brian Armstrong's story. We're worth $100 billion. You know what I mean? Not like, oh, we're trying to fight the ban. Like, this has literally been the story of India. And so look, I mean, yes, I agree with all the frustration and all, but I do think that, I mean, in terms of India, I think it's important to recognize that we do see a path forward, meaning where it doesn't get banned. Okay, that's the important thing. Where governments, if they need to put guardrails on it, they're going to. Like, we don't have that option, and they're going to look at it through their lens. But the important thing right now in India is that it not get banned. And I think what I'm trying to say is that lawmakers are realizing that, you know what I mean, that we have to provide people the opportunity, because it's too good. It's too good. We've been saying it for 10 years, but it's too good. But I wanted to kind of touch on what's going on right now, because I'm kind of glossing over it. So over the last few years, there's this bill. Okay, so now we're not talking about just a central bank. We're talking about the Indian government, right? They've formed a committee, and for a couple of years now, they've been working on this bill, which has now found its way to the parliament, which essentially tries to ban Bitcoin. Okay, so like buying, selling, everything of it, right? So it's pretty, like, I mean, joking aside, it's pretty scary, right? Like, you can imagine, India is I think, very important country, obviously, because, you know, they're a very big country and they are a free country, right? Like, I'm just saying from a democratic perspective, right? Like, it's like they are an ally, right, of the West. They speak English, like you said, the computer hub of the world. I mean, there's a lot of young people there. They get gold. I mean, I can come up with 100 other reasons. My point is, like, they are our friends. And so we need to, I think we need to make sure that Bitcoin doesn't get squashed, right? That the people have some way to protect themselves and get access to this asset. So this bill
from their friends, the regulators, to protect themselves.
What's that?
What's
that?
Ah!
Hey, the regulators need Bitcoin too, right? They're people too, like you said, individuals.
People. Like they're supposed to be helping people, but like they're protecting them from themselves. It's just so disingenuous. Like it makes me so frustrated, especially these days with everything happening.
The institutions don't get Bitcoin. I agree with you. But when you break it down on an individual level, most people, and you just have a heart-to-heart with them, they get it. Like, how can you not, like, if you learn about this thing that you can, like...
I don't worry about them not getting it. I think that they get it, and they don't want their power taken away because they're power-hungry monsters. Like, as a collective, not as individuals, but each of those individuals comprises that. I just think that, like, with this year being so horrendous and the overstepping of government in the corona incident, you know, I'm not saying there's no corona, whatever, everybody stop crying, but like governments have gone so overboard with everything. I'm just having such a hard time stomaching the concept that they're there in order to protect us. They need to do a better job and actually serve their people instead of just bullying everybody. And we're supposed to just be, oh my God, thank you, oh regulator, my king. F them, they belong to us. You talk about democracy. Well, democracy is number one, two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. And I think the time has come because now we actually have the ability to hold our quote unquote rulers accountable. Then maybe we don't need such rulers anymore. I mean, you're talking about poor people in the country that are all broke and like, oh, we have no money. And the regulators are helping them by saying, oh, well, you can't have this. F that. Why am I supposed to respect them? Like, I get it. You have to. That's your country. And you have to work with these people. But I'm an artist and I'm just calling it how I see it. And it's BS. Like, those individuals, they need to look at themselves and they need to say, hey, maybe I need to get a different job because what I'm doing is not for the people. It's because I get a good paycheck. I could pay for my kid to get a nice car, blah, blah, blah. Because that's the reality as to why they're doing it. They have other options. They don't want to do it. They want to be regulators.
The vitriol that you're feeling is fair enough, but as businesses like ours and Sunny's, we need to interface with that system, unfortunately, and our role really is frustrating because we deal with banks, for instance, in the past who take always the very conservative side because they've paid a lot for their licenses and they don't want to jeopardize that, but also. They don't want to have money launderers and drug and all this stuff as well. So it's about our side educating them. They are the money
launderers, incidentally. Well, literally, they are the money launderers. So forgive me for not feeling bad for them when they don't actually prosecute.
But you see, we can't say that to them, right? It's about like trying to educate them into, hey, what do we do to stop this? How do we move forward? What is crypto? And a lot of this is education. But then when laws just come about without the consultation of industry leaders, really bad laws happen. And this is what India is up against now. And great companies like Unocoin are up against. Is that a whole business, not only a business, I mean, it's the whole ecosystem in India could be crushed. And then you'll have another brain drain.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the reality, I guess.
Yeah. So I would say, okay, so to talk about this bill a little bit more, right? So by the way, this bill surfaced itself and now it's been kind of trying to work its way through the parliament, but it seems like it may not. But we'll see. Like I said, there's a lot I can and can't say, but there's been a lot of public, comments now made, especially today. There was a big one as well. Like I'm retweeting all this stuff. Anyone wants to actually see it, but but the narrative has changed now along the lines of like, look, we need to take some sort of like middle way approach, not ban, and that's kind of the big takeaway. I agree. There's a lot of frustration. Do you know Stephen Covey? Have you guys ever heard of Stephen Covey? The Seven Habits of
I've been in
Seven
touch with
Habits
him
of Highly Effective People.
I've read it.
Released my age to the world as well by saying that I read that book. Yeah, but it's an old one. It's an old one. Yeah.
I read
it's
it
a great
like a year
one, right?
ago.
Oh, you did? Okay. So what's number 2? Seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? So seek first to understand, then to be understood. So it's hard. It's really hard to do that, right? Especially in this kind of case, but I'm trying really, really hard. And I'm not going to lie, some of it's starting to kind of make sense. Some of it's making sense. Like, the word, for example, geopolitics, right? I didn't even know what that really meant. But I won't mention any thoughts on any certain recent political events because it gets you banned supposedly now on the internet and like censored. But I will say that there is like obviously a recognition that that there are games being played, and it's not guns and bullets and grenades. There's like information warfare, and we're in the midst of it. And so all I can say is, yeah, it's like 3D chess.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Yeah. So, but okay, but I do think it's positive. Like I said, people should hang in there. And I will also say is people in India, especially who are listening to this, or others, even Bitcoiners, right, is that the future is not like just something that happens. You know what I mean? It's something that we as individuals can kind of like create. And so, so for those who are like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. And especially if you're in India and you're like, oh, I'll just sit back and watch. And if it works out, then it's like, I would encourage you, especially because if you're in India, like, then you have a lot to potentially lose. And I think it's important to speak up. And it's hard to do like a lot of this, like, YouTube and this and that, right? Because there's so much going on. But I do a lot of it mainly because people need to speak up. And after a certain point, it becomes too dangerous to even speak up, right? So I don't know if you know what I mean. Like, it's important for people to speak now and speak about things like Bitcoin and freedom while we have a little bit of it left. But I don't know about you guys, but everybody's under freaking lockdown and like can't go anywhere, and it's insane.
But that's this is why I'm finding it so frustrating though, because like, yes, maybe I'm like a little bit fired up today, but if we don't like call it out what it is and keep whitewashing it and saying, oh, this is okay and it's for our health and like, oh, they mean well, like evil is evil. And I don't want to keep like, I don't know. I mean, you guys remind me a little bit about Perry Ann, right? Perry Ann is a good friend of mine. She is the Chamber of Digital Commerce. And I always kind of like think to myself, like, is it okay that she's like working with the people in order to help the government? And like, you have to live in reality. But at the same time, I feel like we have to be a little bit more vocal because, look at the mask issue, which everybody cries about. But my friend is a personal protection equipment specialist. It's literally her job. And she says that masks are very unhealthy. And now we still have to wear them over our faces. And you know what that says to me? That I'm a slave. And you know what? I don't like that. I'm not an effing slave. And if I don't want to put something over my mouth, my body, my choice. And all of these little tiny encroachments upon our freedoms are exactly how they boil the frog. So it's frustrating when people, because they're polite or because they're nice or because they want to make nice, and these are all completely reasonable things. Like, we kind of like, there were people in the past for freedom that died, that bled. And we're like, well, I don't want anybody to look at me bad because I don't have this mask on. So I'm just going to wear it because that's what everybody tells me to do. Like, are you people effing kidding me? Wake up, and like, yeah, we got to work a little bit with the regulators. And we got to make do with what world we are because we're all part of that world. But I also think that we got to push back. So let's
talk a little bit about role of government, at least from my understanding. I think we can the marauds. Okay, let's forget that one. The marauds, right? The roads argument. Let's forget that one for a bit. Yeah, I mean, okay. So I'm as an engineer, I'm pretty confident humans can build roads. But let's just talk about the one obvious one: common defense, right? Like, we need to be able to protect this land, wherever it may be, Canada, United States, India, right?
How's that been going so far? With the governments having control over the military, because as far as I can tell,
terrible.
They haven't used that right, like, very responsibly, right? Like, all they do is kill people, and I don't want them to do that. Most of the people in America, we haven't even had a discussion around anti-war.
This is a very big topic, right? Like, if we're gonna talk about like governments, I mean, this is an interesting one.
No, you're right. I'm going off on a tangent. I'm fired up.
Well, I mean, I'd be down to
if
you.
But I live in the land of the free, and every day I am faced with the fact that is an effing lie.
Didn't they put someone in jail for a meme the other day in the United States? Didn't they put someone in jail for tweeting a meme or something the other day? You didn't hear about
this
it?
This is the land of the free. And people are like, oh, well, it could be worse. I'm like, oh, well, it could also be better, losers. Like, come on, let's step up a little bit.
Hey,
You know?
One answer that I have for the entire thing in terms of politicians banning Bitcoin is, and I've always liked this idea of just getting them some Bitcoin, getting the people in power some Bitcoin. As soon as they get some, they're like, ooh, I don't want to like crush it. And what will happen actually if you can get as many people Bitcoin as possible in higher places, they'll crush the price for one last time so they can get more, and then they'll say, okay, it's allowed now. And then once they've got it.
I don't think
Tatiana,
that's true.
Can I make my point though, Tatiana? I know what you're trying to say. What have they done? I get that. Okay, I've read all that stuff. I agree with you on a lot of fronts. But let's be very, very realistic. Mumbai was the center point of a deadly terrorist attack where they literally took down not one place, but like 10 or 15 places for like days. Okay, there was like 50,000.
Why did they do that terrorism?
Hold on.
Not that I'm saying, well, whatever.
Okay, we can talk about that. My point is like,
continue.
I think one thing that a lot of people can kind of rally around and get on the same side is that if something like that happens, people take a boat over to your country and they're like trying to kill you and your people, we can all argue that all the money that we're paying in taxes and blah, blah, blah should probably go towards defending us, right? Or the people that live in the country. That's the main point I'm trying to make. Is like, I agree whether it's right or wrong. And that's, I think, a central point. Like, let's hire people with guns to protect us and bombs and stuff. Okay. So if that is the case, then building from there, right? Why would a government want to allow companies, right, like ours to allow Bitcoin to happen? Is because 99.99% of people don't do bad things and terrible things, right?
Well, people do that with dollars, and they allow it to go on under their nose.
Yeah,
because
but they do
like
it under. But in the bank, they use KYC, and they have. And I'm not saying it's positive.
But the bank doesn't get in trouble.
Exactly.
Look at the HSBC. They were. Remember, they had those huge like $2
So what I'm
billion
trying to say is that the banks and the governments have certain guardrails already in place. Whether we agree with them or not is irrelevant. It's different because it's like we can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but someone's got to face reality. Someone's got to be like, okay, these actually are the rules, whether we agree with them or not, right? Like, I mean, if you're going to build a business that's serving millions of people, you're taking money from the Tim Drapers of the world. Somebody's got to do that. So my point is once you do that, you start realizing that, okay, maybe defending the country is important, and by enabling companies like ours where we do put some guardrails in place, again, for better or worse, we can talk about is KIC, but the fact that we do helps, whether it's like a terrorist attack and they need to know, oh my God, this guy's actually funding it, or a child molester, like things that we can all get around. I'm not going to talk about like the marginal things,
but
okay?
That's what makes me frustrated, is that terrorism is funded with us and nobody ever gets in trouble. Pedos are in the freaking office and they don't get in trouble. So that's what I find so disingenuous about all of this.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
If they were putting in the rules and they were actually following them, and like they actually was what you were painting a picture of, that's one specific set of things, right? But what I find frustrating is that they're basically a glorified cartel. These are a bunch of criminals. They're criminal friends. They get away with it, and we don't get away with it. We all have to play by the rules. And then there's a few random people that think they're doing the right thing, and they get caught in the middle of it. But at the end of the day, like, there's their criminal cartel. None of them ever get into any trouble. Nobody ever gets into jail. Nobody, ever, nothing. There's no punishment.
So this is a very big conversation, Tatiana.
Name me one. Look at Sarkozy, right? Sarkozy just got in trouble for corruption, right? They're like, oh, Sarkozy, this is a magnificent event. He got jail time. You know what he got? A year at home in home prison. Guess who else is in home prison? All of us. So how is that a punishment? Like, show me an honest person that's like actually doing something useful in government, and then maybe I can concede to wanting to help them.
I thought really long and hard about sharing this thought, okay? Because what I'm about to share, I never ever share like on a whatever. But okay, if we just step back, okay, I'm not going to talk about any particular government or whatever, okay? But they do exist, and you do need to work with them, and I do see how it's kind of makes sense in a world where people can make sense of it, okay? But fundamentally, how do governments get money?
They print it out of thin air.
Number
with their
one,
little
how
friends
else?
At the Federal Reserve.
Tax, right? Tax is the other way, right? And then they borrow. Those are the three ways the governments get money. All three of those ways are this is
fraudulent.
Okay, I won't even say this is. Yeah, this is my view. They're morally not totally on point, right? Meaning they're using force, right? Gandhi said non-violence, right? So if you believe in the non-aggression principle, right, that means that you don't aggress upon another if they don't aggress upon you. But if I chose not, I pay my taxes, okay? I hire the best accountants, and we try
We
to
all
make
pay
sure
our
we're always our
taxes.
taxes.
With a
But it
mouth like
doesn't-
this, you need to pay your taxes.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I pay my taxes. But the thing is that if I chose, or if someone didn't, they would get taken away by a man with a gun, right? And that's just that. So my point of bringing this up is that if that's how you're becoming into existence, then what you do afterwards is irrelevant.
It doesn't matter.
It
Yeah, it's
doesn't
irrelevant.
matter.
Exactly. It's like,
Even if I do something good
give
with
me your
it.
money, I'm gonna build
The
a school.
fact that we're even questioning then if you buy into your argument of they do all the bad stuff, then you're probably the same person that's going to be like, my roads, but my schools,
roads.
right? It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All of it doesn't matter. And
Let's find a better way of funding these things.
And here's the thing. In the history of humanity, people do wake up. Slavery at one point on this side of the world was a thing. It was something that governments said.
There's more slavery now than any other time in
No,
history.
but Tatiana, go with me in terms of like real, like I'm talking like the concept of slavery was institutionally as the government.
Legally.
But there's literally more physical slaves now than in all history. I heard that statistic and I was really surprised. So, we don't think that there's slavery anymore, but it actually exists more prevalently than ever.
Yeah, but you don't have legal ownership of someone.
Yes. What I'm just saying is...
Okay, yes, I suppose it's
my
not
point, what I'm trying to say...
in all places?
No, what I'm trying to say
Good
is...
job.
Okay, No, what I'm trying to say though is that it was legal in this parts of the world, right? It was literally legal, meaning it was okay. Like, my point is that during that time, somebody could have been like, well, if we get rid of slavery, how are we going to get, the cottons in the field, right? Like people would be using that kind of argument, right? It'd be like, well, you need slavery. It's like, that's when you use a good, forget the bad. All the bad stuff is obvious. All the good is even, fight that. Right? Fight that, because that's when you get to the root of morally what's going on. And if slavery is morally wrong and we woke up to it, then we should be questioning these other morally questionable stances. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm for or against it. This is just something I heard on the internet.
Yeah, it'd be like, but if we get rid of forced marriage, how will Ugly Bob ever get married?
Exactly. Think of Bob.
That's not what a weird...
Anyways, you kind of see where I'm going with this. My point is, like, it's exhausting to talk about it because that doesn't change anything. Because what does change something is Bitcoin. And Bitcoin ideally not getting banned, right? And we all know, like, it's going to cause way more damage to governments and to societies if they try and ban it. And you hold it, buy it, sell it, like promote it, think about it, like anything. Like you can't put people away. Like the youth are so captivated. The richest, wealthiest man on earth is captivated by this technology, and everyone in between.
That's what makes them scared.
And
why
everyone
would they like that?
Well, it's the onboarding,
like?
And the thing is, if they ban this, the onboarding of it, people just go to more.
Well, they can't ban it,
the
right?
technology builds around it. The technology builds around it. So people start building peer-to-peer networks, peer-to-peer meetup groups where you say, hey, let's meet up at Starbucks and I'll give you a Bitcoin, you give me a rupee. It all just happens anyway, whether you ban it or not. What happens, though, is when they ban it, they ban great companies like Unocoin or established, well-meaning, doing everything by the book. And that's all that gets damaged. Bitcoin isn't going anywhere. Like you said, it doesn't need government to survive. So, there's really no point in banning it. All you're doing is driving it underground, which continues its proliferation as it was. It just doesn't allow the people to easily work and build companies. It also stops programmers and the smart brains from sticking around. So I just think it's a massively foolish thing. What can people do to help you with your fight there in India?
That's a good question. So the two things that I was trying to kind of narrow in on, which has been difficult because for certain reasons. No, I'm kidding.
Unruly.
I'm kidding. Tatiana, no, I love you. You're great. No. But the two things that that I, again, seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? So what is it that if they are, let's assume they're not corrupt, let's forget the babies and the blah, blah, blah. Let's just think, if we assume the governments are there to defend us, if nothing else, then banning it is dangerous. So national defense and figuring out how to defend India, not just the borders, right? And by the way, I won't mention against what country, you can do the math, but 20 soldiers were killed at the Indian border earlier 6 months ago, right? Yeah. So there is something going on, and it's not just about bullets, right? It's about more than that. And today I would argue that 99% of the warfare is happening with ones and zeros, not, atoms, right? And so from that perspective, banning and throwing this asset class that everybody is obsessed with almost, especially the youth, and then throwing that underground and pitting them against the government is a recipe for disaster, right? And you're seeing in Nigeria what's happening, and again, my point is like, it's just not smart. So we would like to do that intelligently, where it doesn't encroach on people's sovereignty, where identity has been a point of a lot of problems, Equifax, on and on and on. Like the centralization of identity is a problem. But India did do the Aadhaar card. Like they are very forward thinking on a lot of fronts. And so we think there's a way that this technology can still be aligned. And ultimately, by the way, right, Bitcoin, if it succeeds, to me, if it truly succeeds, these things we're talking about for frustrations, I think they'll become less and less of an issue, okay? And then, like I said, there are certain things I can talk about. There's things I can't. But just know that even people in government, right, if they're going to do nefarious things with Bitcoin, they're going to get caught. And I'll just say they have been caught, okay? And I won't talk about names and who and stuff, but there's been... The blockchain it's not just about like the people. It's also about keeping the other people, everybody honest. It's like, it's insane. There's so many things going on with Bitcoin right now that we think it's a force for good. And we wanted to, because that's the first thing. Second thing is, so once you defend your country, and then what do you want? You want to prosper, right? You want to excel. You want to grow. So how do you do that? You make sure that your country is on the proper footing to compete against every other country. So what if India, you take these millions of super smart programmers and people with this energy and love for gold and digital gold and and you enable them and you give them the tools to build and again, not to ban, but to build on top of Bitcoin, and you create, like Unocoin, we had 150, 200 people almost employed at our company at our peak, and we're one of the, now not even the biggest company, there's so many other ones. So we think India, jobs and all that kind of stuff, right, comes with it, and more taxes, right? Governments, they love taxes. So go get it, right? Anyways, and I know it sounds weird, right? Why would a Bitcoiner, why would a libertarian talk about KYC? Why would he talk about taxes? Because when you run a science experiment, you have to narrow in on one variable. And right now, for me, that variable is Bitcoin making its way into everybody's hands. And if the banking system is where everybody exists, someone's got to deal with them. It's hard. It's like chewing glass. But someone's got to deal with them, right? Because it's for my mom, it's for my dad, it's for my grandma, it's not for me. I know the whole cold card, I know Rodolfo, I know it all, but it's for them, and I'm not going to leave them behind. So that's why the Brian Armstrongs and the Jessies sometimes, you know what I mean? It's hard, but I think that they're laying a framework, right? Like Jesse's a bank. Jesse's a bank. Kraken's a bank. Like that's where we want to see India eventually.
Jesse is a literal bank now.
He's a boss bank. Okay, so that's a lot, but national defense, national competitiveness, let's go. Like my point, I know, you know what I mean? We don't want it to get banned.
I think if anything is getting this episode banned, it's me.
Definitely. You're gonna go the way of Alex Jones. Are you even allowed to say his name?
I'm not even.
You're gonna go the way of Dr. Zeus.
I'm just in reality, guys. I don't care about no AJ. I'm just seeing it like these are undeniable things that are kind of coming.
Even the T word.
I think that's why a lot of people are frustrated.
The T word that rhymes with dump.
Yeah.
Is no longer allowed to be said on the internet. The most powerful individual in the world is now censored.
Formerly known as president.
And that's another one. Whether you agree with him or her or whoever that is, right, or not, the fact that that person was censored is just profound
so
to me.
Crazy.
Like, I was always raised like being known, this is the most powerful man. Okay, so my parents always told me, like, U.S. president, right?
Yeah.
And that man was like literally censored. So I'm in like a weird state, like in the last couple of weeks. Again, forget what you think of him. Yes, no, maybe so. But it was literally censored. It's like, so if people don't wake up.
The president of the United States was full on censored. He's still not allowed back on Twitter.
It's
the
so
Twitter
crazy.
gods.
It's so weird.
Cancel culture really is a dress rehearsal for murder. That's for sure. It's a character assassination. It's a way of destroying someone and seeing if anybody misses them. It really is a dress rehearsal. It's a very scary thing, this cancel culture, because all of a sudden these people just disappear. They disappear unless you really go hunting for them. They disappear, and
it is scary. It is scary. It is scary,
Yeah.
and it is a challenge of our time, and it needs to be solved. And I can tell you one thing. Lately, aside from Unocoin, Paykeys, kind of my babies, like the Bitcoin, blah, 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 I'm spending a lot of time nowadays thinking about how to rebuild everything, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like everything. Yeah. And I think it's possible, and I think Bitcoiners will do that. I think a lot of them will come together, and whether it's like, look, like, for example, why don't I have a Bitcoin phone? I mean, there's a Bitcoin phone out there now, but why don't, you know what I mean? Why doesn't my operating system like marry itself with Bitcoin? Like, why doesn't my phone have a chip? Yeah. Like, everything around me, like, should be, I want a Bitcoin car. I want a Bitcoin everything. I want to build off of Bitcoin
my
principles.
My BTC. It's not.
Yeah. Like right now, I'm just like filling this conversation up with words so I don't have to talk about hard things. What?
All Berliner number plates start with a B. Mine just happens to have TC after them.
Oh, really? Okay, well, that's pretty neat. I'm not going to lie.
So, Tatiana, what other questions you got? I see you were asking about some other stuff too, right? Or are we done?
Well, we have to kind of wrap up the show, but I have some questions about what's going on with your podcast, though.
Yeah.
Because I've really enjoyed, like, we had a really nice conversation there, and I want you to plug it a little bit. I mean, everybody wants to tune into the Tatiana Show, but, you know, in their spare time, they might have time for the Sunny Show.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it. Well, you were obviously an inspiration, right? Because you've been doing podcasts and vodcasts for some time. And so another gentleman was that guy, Aaron, from BTC Bitcoin Magazine. Why? What am I doing? So I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know. I don't really know.
Time, that's for sure.
All I'm doing is I'm talking. Okay, so my events that I used to do, that you performed at, I realized, by the way, I think that particular event, I lost like $100,000 or something, like personally, just to do it. So it was a bit painful. So now, and then in light of COVID, I was like, how can I bring that same energy? And I was like, oh my God, I could just like record my Zoom calls. Hey, Eva, can you not hit that mic? Thank you. You can come up here. Sorry, I got a little one here. We essentially had, so I was like, how do I bring that energy? I'm like, I could just record my Zoom calls and put it on YouTube. So it's kind of like that. That's all my show is. So I'm on episode 90, almost 87. Very cool. Max Kaiser to, just you name it, like just anybody and everybody that, authors, singers, entrepreneurs. I'm just trying to bring like a lot of different perspectives to it. And the whole theme is building on Bitcoin. So I'm trying to inspire people to be like, yes, NGU number go up is great, but that's kind of the least great thing about Bitcoin. Like you can actually build a career on it. Yeah, it's super hard, as you've heard, and crazy, and it's like chewing glass and staring into the abyss, as Elon has said. But I do believe that there's an opportunity to not just make a lot of money, but to change the world for this one who's trying to knock down my mic right now.
It really is one of the most fun things you can do, being part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and especially what we mentioned before with the Lightning Network. There is so much to be built out there. A really good friend of mine, Ben Ark, he's been building on it like crazy. There's so many really, really cool things to be built. So get in there, read the work. If you're an engineer, read that, read the stuff that needs to be read and start working on it. It's super fun. It's super enjoyable. And it's probably one of the best things you can do with your career.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. We should have like a lightning revolution in India. And like I said, looking at the big picture, I do think we'll overcome this challenge. Everyone's really coming together in a way I've never seen. And so it's going to be positive, and India's, I think, going to be a very, very important place. I think it hasn't been, traditionally speaking, like globally speaking, but at the start of this, didn't we? Oh no, people talk about like, what's it called? Indian Standard Time. Like, Indian people sometimes show up late at parties, especially in North America. They're like notorious for that. And I think that's kind of reflective of the culture from like the internet, right? The internet didn't start in India, but when it came, it kind of took the country by storm. And I think Bitcoin will have a similar effect in India, and vice versa. India will have a very positive effect on Bitcoin long term.
Yeah,
I hope so. Thanks, everybody. I can't wait for the India Unocoin conference in person. Enough of this online stuff. But in the meantime, make sure everybody to check out Sunny's show. If you're in India, check out Unocoin. If you're not in India, I think you could also check it out. So thanks, everybody. Please check out this show on Tuesdays. No, wait, what show is this? I get all my shows mixed up. Okay. The Tatiana Show can be found on Tuesdays, and then Proof of Love is on Fridays. So we still got to get you, Sunny, onto Proof of Love. And you too,
I owe
Josh,
you a
for
Proof
that
of
matter.
Love. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And if you want to take some crypto profits and put it into bullion, you can do so on Voltoro, and then you can trade back to crypto whenever you want.
Alrighty.
Interesting.
That's right. Take your profits, homies. See you later, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.
What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. Hey there, it's time for the show. The Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana, or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor, and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show.